So this is a video about how to change your life. And in the video, I want to talk you through the Think Day method, where in about 4 hours, you can drastically change the trajectory of your life. You guys know Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft. He had this practice, and he would call it a think week, where once or twice a year, he would go off to a cabin in the woods for a whole week. He would clear his calendar, he would get a private chef, private chef would bring him food and stuff, and he would just use that week to read and to think. And Bill Gates actually credits quite a lot of Microsoft's most like best innovations and stuff to this think week practice, where he's just sort of sitting in this cabin and doing a lot of thinking and making decisions. Now, most of us probably don't have a whole week to take off to go to a cabin in the woods to make these sorts of decisions. And so there's a technique that I came across in my friend Sahil Bloom's book, 5 Types of Wealth, which is called a Think Day. And the reason I want to do a Think Day for me today is because there are a bunch of decisions that I need to make about my business and about my life. And if I make the right kind of decision in this kind of moment, then honestly, it could be worth millions to tens of millions of dollars if we just think in terms of like monetary ROI. That's what we're doing in this video. I want to talk you through my personal approach to the Think Day method. And instead of just sitting at my desk and telling you about it, we thought we'd go to a place in Hong Kong that I've never been before. And I want to show you the actual journaling prompts that I have gotten incredible value out of over the years. I would say that these journaling prompts that I'm going to share with you are things that I have used repeatedly to change my life in increasingly positive directions. Because of certain decisions that I made earlier in life, I was able to start my business and get really rich and become financially free and like quit the job and, all of that kind of stuff. Because of certain decisions I made, I ended up meeting a woman who then became my wife, and we now have a kid. So I basically swear by having the right kind of journaling or reflection prompts and using those as ideally in a fashion that's outside of your normal context to help inform what decisions you want to make. What does it mean for your life to actually change? The way I would personally define it, it's that currently your life is going on a trajectory that looks something like this. If you change nothing else, time is still marching on, you're still moving towards your inevitable demise, and we're all just going with life. Now, what it would mean to change your life is if you make a decision that causes you to take some actions, which then changes the trajectory of your life. It's sort of like you're going down the highway, and then instead of continuing to go straight, which is the path that you're currently on, you decide to take a turn. Now, if you decide to take that turn, that means you end up in a different destination than you would have been before. And so your life has changed. Now, the way I think about this is that it really comes down to the decision that you make. So for example, you could decide right now that tomorrow you're going to rob the local bank, right? You could just make that decision, and if you followed through on it, then your life would change. But the trajectory of your life would probably go in a negative direction, i.e. you'd probably regret having robbed that bank, and you probably wouldn't advise other people to try and rob a bank because your life will change for the worst. Similarly, you could decide to quit your job or to drop out of university or to break up your engagement or your marriage or whatever. You could make these drastic life-changing decisions, and now your life has changed because of a decision that you've made. So what that really means is that the quality of our decisions dictates the quality of our lives. If you make a decision that causes you to take actions that move you in a positive direction, then your life has changed for the better. If you make a decision that causes you to take actions that end up in a negative situation, your life has changed for the worst. So all of that is context as to why this video is titled How to Change Your Life, right? Because otherwise it sounds like a clickbaity title, but really what changing your life comes down to is a decision that you've made. So instead of doing a think week, you just do a think day or a think 4 hours, where you basically take half a day or a day, maybe 4 hours out of your normal day-to-day routine. You go to a place where you haven't really been before to get you outside of your normal context, and you just use that time to think. You use that time to do some journaling, to do some reading, to do some thinking. And as a result of that, you hopefully make a decision or two that changes the trajectory of your life in a positive way. Now, the reason that I like to generally go outside of my comfort zone when doing stuff like this is because when you're in your home environment or your office environment or your usual day-to-day situation, there's all sorts of subconscious patterns that we just find ourselves following. Our brain is kind of like a prediction machine that likes to conserve a lot of energy by just sort of defaulting to decisions that we've made in the past. So when you're at work or at school, at your office or at home, you just naturally find yourself in the sorts of thinking patterns that you've always been in the past. Whereas if you want to actually get context, it's sort of like zooming out or going 30,000 feet or whatever. You can get more of a bird's eye view of your life to approach decisions from a more sort of dispassionate, more zoomed out perspective. Whereas when you're in it, when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to actually make life-changing decisions. And so what we're going to do in this video is you're going to come along with me as we go to a new area in Hong Kong, and I'm going to talk you through the exact journaling prompts that I'm thinking about, and I'll be sharing all of those with you. And so hopefully, as a result of watching this video and doing some of these journaling prompts and maybe doing your own Think Day, that will result in the trajectory of your life being changed as a result of watching this video and putting it into practice. In other exciting news, my team and I are constantly experimenting with loads of different AI tools to run our business more effectively. But here's the thing, the tech is evolving at a ridiculous pace, as you know, and one thing that I found really helpful is to understand the fundamentals to be able to then separate the genuinely useful stuff from all of the hype. And one way that I found that really works for developing this deeper kind of learning is through Brilliant, who are the very kind paid partners of this video. Brilliant is an amazing online interactive learning platform that I've actually been using since 2019, so it's been like 6 years now. And every month, Brilliant just keeps getting better and better. And the thing is, like, we are surrounded by all of these like quick and easy learning promises that, oh, learn this thing super quickly and super easily. But if you actually want to build valuable skills like coding, or to actually understand how AI tools work, you need something more substantial, something that helps you think through problems rather than just memorizing syntax. Me and my team have found it really helpful to go through Brilliant's new course on how AI works, and that just helps you unlock a deeper way of understanding large language models and then being able to actually use AI in your day-to-day workflow. What I love most about Brilliant is that it lets you play around with real concepts, like dragging and tweaking and experimenting until things click. It's not at all about just memorizing stuff, it's about actually thinking like a problem solver. And I've genuinely found that this approach of wrestling with interactive problems rather than just sort of passively consuming a tutorial, that's actually made me a better thinker across everything I do. So if you'd like to give your brain a proper workout and finally get how AI actually works, then head over to brilliant.org/AliAbdaal or scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. And if you decide to go for the annual premium subscription, you'll get 20% off that as well. So thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. Okay, so this is a little pocket notebook, by the way, that I like to bring along when I'm doing these sorts of journaling sessions. It's like quite vibey. The whole idea is that you draw a circle, and then you split your circle up into 3 sections, and then you split those 3 sections up into 3 more sections. So you end up with 9 bits of your circle. Now the 3 big sections are, we've got health, and then we have a big section for work, relationships. Within health, we've got 3 further categories. We've got physical health, mental health, and spiritual health, which you can define however you like. Within work, we've got mission, money, and growth. And within relationships, we've got family, friends, and romantic. And so those are like our 9 different categories. And I like to add a 10th category off on the side labeled joy. Now you've got these 10 different categories in your little wheel of life. And the whole idea is that you just ask yourself, if 10 out of 10 in a category was like, man, like I cannot imagine my life being any better in this particular domain, that's a 10. And 1 out of 10 is like, man, I cannot imagine my life being any worse in this domain. What number would you rate your like satisfaction with your life in each of these 10 different domains? You sort of fill out your little wheel of life and you get like a little sort of pie radar chart type thing, which is kind of nice. It's kind of nice as a visual, although if you want, you can just write it down in a notes file and you get the numbers. But basically what this does is that it gives you a feel for, if you were to do almost like a CT scan of like your life, what are the areas that are going well and what are the areas where, you know, concerted effort would help improve things. So in my case, for example, let's start with health. So physical health, I would say, is at a 6. Mental health, I would say, is at a 9. Spiritual health, I would say, is at a 7. In the work domain, mission is on a 9, money is on a 9.5, and growth is currently on 8. And then in relationships, romantic relationship, I'm in a relationship with my wife, I would say is on a 9. Family, we now have a kid, I would say is on 8. And friends, I would say is on 6. And then joy, how much joy do I have in my life, or how satisfied am I with the joy in my life? I would probably say about 6. So now, based on those numbers, I have a somewhat like intuitive sense of what are the areas that need some work. So based on that, we've identified that physical health needs some work. When I'm doing the rest of my journaling, I now have that in mind. That like, okay, cool, I should probably make some decisions that can change my life in the domain of physical health. We've identified that on the work front, to be honest, on the work front, I'm pretty good. On the relationships front, friends could do with some work, because I haven't seen friends in a while. Since having a baby and stuff, like we just have been quite antisocial. We spent a month in London, which was amazing, but now we're back in Hong Kong. We haven't put in the effort to organize stuff with friends. So friends could do with some work. And then the joy category for me is also only a 6 out of 10. And so I could do with a bit more fun in my life, basically. And so having identified that as like the 3 core categories that are, you know, helpful to look at, I now have more of a feel for, okay, now when I'm doing the other journaling prompts, let me just make sure I've at least got some stuff to ideally touch on all these. And I've written them down in my notebook, because by the end of this Think Day, I want to have at least 1 or 2 action points for each of these 3 kind of areas of weakness, as it were. So if you are following along with the video, please feel free to pause the video now and do your own Wheel of Life. These are the 10 different categories on screen. And I would love for you to just have a think about what would your score be out of 10 for each of these categories. And then feel free to write it down somewhere. It's generally useful to write it down. Feel free to share it in a comment if you would like. And feel free to share already if any action points come to mind. And so one thing we're also doing in our Think Day is that, and I generally like to do this on a separate piece of paper, is that we're keeping a sort of rolling tally of our action points. Because as we do these exercises, we're going to come up with action points. Then at the end of it, we're going to look at all of our action points and we're going to be like, okay, which of these do I actually want to take forward to take really seriously? Oh, and by the way, if you happen to be watching this before Saturday, the 20th of September, 2025, I'm actually hosting a totally free online workshop to help you go through these sorts of questions. There are 100 days left in 2025, and so this is our final workshop of the year. We've been hosting these every 3 months for about 2 years. We've got tens of thousands of people attend them from all around the world. It's completely free, there's no catch. And it basically is like a 2-hour workshop where I will be guiding you through a bunch of these sort of reflective journaling-y type prompts. And we've had loads of testimonials and stuff from people who are like, this is the best 2 hours that they ever spend every quarter, because it gives you clarity on kind of where you want to go in your life for the next 3 months. So if you're interested in joining us, it's completely free, there's no catch, and there'll be a link in the video description for you to check out. Okay, so we are here in the Cupping Room, which is a cute little coffee shop here in West Kowloon. There's good vibes. So this is the single most powerful journaling prompt that I know of. If you ask yourself this question and sincerely engage with the answer in terms of not just engaging intellectually with it, but also how you feel, intuitively, if you had to answer intuitively, the prompt would be as follows. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? This is a powerful, powerful prompt. It's powerful because one of the biggest things, possibly the single biggest thing that holds us back from living the life that we actually want is fear. And in particular, the fear of failure. We are wired to avoid failure at all costs. The amygdala, the fear center of the brain, the habenula, is all of this stuff. There's hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that has trained us to avoid failure. Because back in the day, failure meant death. Failure meant you weren't going to survive, to reproduce and continue your genes and all that crap. And so we feel very, very, very fearful about making changes to our life. It's just one of the massive biases that you see with literally everyone. And so the point of this prompt is to cut past that and just, let's just pretend. Let's just pretend that you knew you couldn't fail. What would you actually do if you knew you couldn't fail? And you think about it, and then you also answer intuitively. Intuitively, what's the first answer that comes to mind? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? For me, when I think about this question, I immediately come up with things that I would do differently in my business. And it makes me realize that actually there's quite a lot as it relates to the business. A lot of fear that's holding me back from doing the stuff that I actually know I want to do. And then, back when I still used to be a doctor, and people would ask me, why don't you just quit medicine? You seem to enjoy this business stuff more. Ultimately, fear of failure was the thing that stopped me. It was this fear that but what if I try going full-time on the business thing, and what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? And what I find really helpful is Tim Ferriss has a fear-setting exercise where whenever I have identified something that I'm doing because I'm afraid, I just go in Google and I type in Tim Ferriss fear setting. And then I open up Tim Ferriss's blog post from May 2017, the most valuable exercise I do every month. And it basically got a bunch of questions. Also, it's a very good blog post. I actually would recommend reading it. Here we go. Define your nightmare, the absolute worst that could happen if you did what you're considering. What doubts, fears, and what-ifs pop up as you consider the big changes you can or need to make? Envision them in painstaking detail. Would it be the end of your life? What would be the permanent impact, if any, on a scale of 1 to 10? Are these things really permanent? How likely do you think it is that they would actually happen? Number 2, what steps could you take to repair the damage or get things back on the upswing, even if temporarily? Chances are it's easier than you imagine. How could you get things back under control? And I'll put the other questions in here, and we'll also link to the blog post in the video description. So if you are interested in reading the questions, please feel free to pause the video right now. So what the fear setting exercise does is first you ask yourself the question of what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And then the follow-up question is okay, well, why am I not doing it? And then the answer to that question is always fear. I'm afraid to quit my job because I'm afraid. I'm afraid to break up my relationship because I'm afraid. I'm afraid to start that business because I'm afraid. I'm not posting on social media because I'm afraid. I have fear around showing my face. What if people laugh at me? What if HR recognizes me one day, on my Instagram profile and it's all fear. And the thing with fear is that fear looms really, really, really large in our minds and in our hearts. And so what the fear setting exercise does is it basically forces us to write it down on paper. Let's say you do start that business. What's the absolute worst case scenario? Okay, well, the worst case scenario is I invest all my life savings into it and I lose all my life savings. Cool. Would that be the end of your life? Well, probably not, but like it would be really bad. What would be the permanent impact, if any, on a scale of 1 to 10? Is it really permanent? How likely do you think that it would actually happen? How likely am I actually to invest all of my life savings into my business? Is it possible to start a business without requiring any investments? Well, yes, 100%. There's loads of businesses that start without any investment. They're called bootstrap businesses. It's a whole category of business. So it's like, by like taking the fear and writing it down, you often realize that, oh, wait a minute. Because when it's in your brain, it's just like, it's like a dark monster that's in your brain. But when it's on paper, it becomes a problem to solve. Like, let's say you were designing a bridge. Designing a bridge is a pretty complex thing. Would you do it in your head? No, you absolutely wouldn't do it in your head. It would just be dumb to do it in your head. You would write it down. You would get out a whiteboard, you would get out some software, you would get out some paper, you would write it down, and you work with a team to write down the design of the bridge before you try to build the bridge. And so similarly with complex issues in our life, especially the things that we know we want to do intuitively, but we are afraid, fear is holding us back. This is actually a fairly complex thing, it's not simple. And so trying to solve that in your head is just a recipe for staying stuck in that pattern. At least that's what I found, and that's what a lot of people I know in the situation have found. So when you put it down on paper, by asking yourself these kinds of questions, what would I do if I knew it couldn't fail? And then, okay, well, if it's fear that's holding me back, what actually is the worst case scenario? How might I go about it? Like if I had a gun to my head, what might I do to mitigate against the worst case scenario? You start writing the stuff down and you realize, wait a minute, actually, it's not too bad. The worst case scenario usually isn't as bad as you think it is. In your brain, you're like, I'm gonna die. And usually you're not gonna die. In your brain, you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna die forever. And usually it's not gonna be forever. Usually it's not that permanent. And in your brain, you're like, there's nothing I can do about it. But you realize that like, the road to ruin is not like, it's not binary. Usually there's a series of things that you start doing, that you do. Like, yes, it would be dumb to just straight up invest all of your business, all of your life savings in starting your first business. But could you invest $100 and see what happens? Then another 300, then another 500, just to see what happens and get data along the path and then iterate based on the data and treat it as experiments? Yeah, 100% you could do that. But the brain doesn't come up with that solution. The brain thinks, oh my God, we could lose everything. We've been told starting a business is risky. Oh my God, we're going to end up homeless and broke and alone and we're going to die. And that's what the brain likes to say. When you put it on paper, you realize that that's actually not true. So that's why this is the key question. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? So if you'd like to follow along with the video, please feel free to pause it right now and ask yourself, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? Yeah, I guarantee you've come up with something. Come up with something. It's probably something that your heart initially came up with. You know what the thing is, but then the mind is like, no, we couldn't do that because A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so feel free. We'll put the fear setting exercise questions on screen again. So feel free to pause the video. And for that thing that you're afraid of doing, feel free to ask yourself these questions. Oh, and by the way, in case you don't want to do this following along the video, we will put a link to my Think Day guide that has all of these prompts and templates and shit like that in like a Google Doc so that you can just like access it on your phone if you're doing your own Think Day, or you can print it out or whatever you want. That'll be linked in the video description if you want to check it out. Okay, so having said all that spiel, I'm now going to do this exercise for myself. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? All right, so come up with my list of stuff. A lot of it is like business things. Like I feel like I'm on the verge of making a bunch of decisions in the business. And it's basically just fear that's holding me back from just like not doing them. But if I knew I couldn't fail, I would just like make all the decisions in one go. And so that is interesting. That is interesting. Feel free to skip to the next timestamp if you don't care, but I'm just going to tell you about one of the key realizations I've just had is that I've been toying with the idea for the last like couple of months of building this lifestyle business academy, where I really like the idea of building like an online school for entrepreneurs with some offline elements as well, something like in-person stuff. And what I've got in my head as like a tagline is like the world's best school for lifestyle entrepreneurs, where, you know, a traditional MBA teaches you how to run someone else's business like some big corporate. If you do like a startup accelerator, it teaches you how to get like a venture capitalist funded startup and become a zillionaire or whatever. But there's not actually there's not that much stuff out there. And certainly I don't know of any good online schools for people who want to build lifestyle businesses where, you know, you're building a business that does, you know, 6 figures in revenue, maybe like low 7 figures in revenue. Like it's not that sexy. No one's going to write about you in a magazine. You're never going to appear on the front cover of Time magazine and stuff. But you have a business that gives you fun, fulfillment, and freedom, and you're making good money, and you have a small team. Maybe it's just you, maybe it's a small team. It would be really, really, really cool to build like an online business school like that. And if I knew I couldn't fail, I would just totally go for it because that feels really exciting. And what's holding me back from like going all in on it is sort of this worry that like, what if it doesn't work? What if people think I'm some sort of get-rich-quick scamming fucking whatever? What if we try and then we end up hiring like faculty and like, you know, the whole shebang? And what if we don't get enough students to actually make money from it? What if it's unprofitable? I also really want to have an in-person office where we can like hold workshops and stuff for entrepreneurs, and we can get the team working in person. The other thing, you know, the fear around that is like, but offices are expensive, especially in Hong Kong. Real estate is expensive. What if we don't make enough money to make it like ROI positive and all that kind of stuff? And so this is just my sort of specific situation with the business right now, which is basically like, what if we don't make enough money from these things that I want to do? Because these things will be expensive. So what if we just don't make enough money for it to be profitable? But then if I think worst case scenario, we just like shut it down. Easy. Yeah. Yeah. In the mind, it's very easy to think that like it's a binary thing. It either works or it doesn't work. But actually, there are all sorts of shades of gray in between. What does it mean for something to work? Well, we're getting enough students, and they're paying us enough money, and they're getting enough results. Basically, those are the three variables. If we know we're not getting enough students, there's lots of stuff we could do to get more students. If the unit economics are not profitable, we just raise the prices so that they are profitable. If they don't have a good enough experience, well, we refund the people that have a bad experience and really work on nailing the student experience. Like, there's all sorts of things we could do to make this really good. But when the fear gets in the way, it's just like, what if it doesn't work? What if it loses money? What if we end up broke? And actually, if you double click on that and really write down like, okay, what would have to happen for that to be the case? And where are all of the points of intervention where I could do something about it? There's like a zillion different points of intervention and like 100 different things that have to happen in order for it to be broken, unprofitable and stuff. And it's just very easy. Like what I've realized from doing this exercise that I was thinking in the past. I was just sort of, without really thinking too hard about it, just allowing the general fear of like, oh, what if it doesn't work, to sort of hold me back from wanting to do this thing that I really want to do. So that's good to know. Cool. All right. I think we're done for this little segment. Let's move locations, and then we will do our next little prompt. All right, so far we've done part one, which was the Wheel of Life exercise to do a little bit of a life audit, and we wrote down our action points that resulted from that. Part two is that we really seriously took the question, what would I do if I knew I wouldn't fail? In part three, what I normally like to do is that I just have these collections of journaling prompts, and I generally just like to scroll through them on my phone, and I decide like which one feels like it's calling out to me. And then I'll just sort of like really think about the question and generally try and write my answers down in a physical notebook, or like dictate my answers into VoicePal, which is our like AI writing app thing. So here are some of the journaling prompts. What would you do if money were no object? Was kind of interesting. If you didn't care about making money, how would you use your talents and skills to serve other people? What would I like people to say at my funeral, and to what extent am I currently living aligned with that future? If I repeat this week's actions for the next 10 years, where does it lead, and is that where I want to be? What activities in the last month have energized me, and what activities in the last month have drained me? How can I do more of what energizes me and less of what has drained me? When it comes to my work or my life, what is the goal, and what is the primary bottleneck? This is a fun one for entrepreneurs. Do I work for my business, or does my business work for me? If I knew I was going to die 2 years from now, how would I spend my time? I always like asking that one. I ask myself this question almost all the time. And the answer I almost always arrive on is that I probably play more video games. And then I have like a burst of playing video games for like a week, and then I sort of get out of the habit, and then I'm like, actually I probably would play more video games. Oh, this is another nice bottleneck one that I got from my friend Dickie Bush. What's the biggest bottleneck to achieving my next goal, and why aren't I working on it? It's always an interesting one. How much do my current goals reflect my own desires versus someone else's? What are some areas in which I could invest more money to make life smoother and easier for myself? What could I do to make my life more meaningful? What do I wish I could do more quickly, and what do I wish I could do more slowly? And finally, what backpack am I carrying that no longer serves me? This is a question from Keith Cunningham's book, The Road Less Stupid. And by backpack, it's sort of like we all walk around. Imagine like walking around with like a heavy backpack on your back. And it's sort of like we all have these things that we're carrying around that at one point served us, like an identity or a fear or a concern or like a grudge or a whatever. And by asking the question of like, what backpack am I lugging around that no longer serves me? It's worth Yeah, just taking a little bit of a pause to really think about the answer to that question. I always get some good insights whenever I do it myself. All of these questions are in our little Think Day guide. And so what I'd recommend is you download the guide. It's free. Open it up on your phone next time you're doing a Think Day, and you just go through, and you don't have to do all of them. It will take absolutely ages to do all of them. Usually I just I see how much time I've got left, how much time I want to devote to the Think Day, and then I pick 3 or 4 or 5 that really vibe with me, and then I'll usually do some writing about them on the thing, or I'll go on VoicePal and just sort of walk around and speak out my answers to the thing. And actually, all of these journaling prompts are also built into VoicePal, but you can't access them by default. So if you open up VoicePal and you go on your profile settings and then you hit offer codes, if you enter the code ThinkDay, then all of these journaling prompts will be added to the brainstorming frameworks part of your app. So you can find all of those there if you want to actually do this kind of just voice journaling rather than actively sort of writing stuff out. So then you can do as many of these different journaling prompts as you like. And then we move on to the final part of Think Day, where we are going to weave everything together into some specific, tangible action items. Okay, so final order of business for the day is basically to document decisions and actions. So my favorite way of documenting decisions is as follows. So for each decision that I want to make, I basically write in my notebook, before today, I was ... So I might say, before today, I was unsure about whether to get an in-person office for my team, or something like that, for example. And then we say, but as of today, I have decided that ... As of today, I've decided that I will in fact get an office for my team, or whatever your thing might be. And therefore, my action items are 1, 2, and or 3. And so we're documenting decisions and we are documenting action points. So in my case for the office, therefore my action items are delegate the finding of the office to someone on the team, look through all of the offices that I've seen before, blah, 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 get some, all of that kind of stuff depending on what the thing is. And then finally, I will review this in whatever time frame to check in on myself. And so this is usually when, if I'm taking this seriously, I will create a calendar event a week from now to sort of review action points from Think Day, just to make sure that I've got a check-in point, because otherwise it's very easy to do this stuff, document action points, and then not actually do the thing. But if you have a documented meeting with yourself in your calendar a week from now, that generally gives enough time for the thing to percolate and for the action points to, at least make a start on them. And then generally I'll get a feel for okay, now that I've slept on this, now that I've had a week to think about it, do I still want to stand by the decision and therefore continue on that route with my particular action points? So if you are following along and you've gotten to this point in the video, I would love to see a comment down below. What is one decision and or action that you've maybe considering taking as a result of doing these different journaling prompts or these different reflection exercises? In my case, I have a handful. In terms of the business, we've got the office thing, we've got this lifestyle business academy thing that I want to build. There is 1 or 2 hires that I want to make in the team that I was a bit unsure about previously, that now, having done this journaling and stuff, I've realized that I just should make those hires. I've also decided that I'm going to experiment with going to the gym first thing in the morning before starting work, as a way of sort of just jacking up the physical health things. One of the general hacks in life is that if there's anything you want to do, make sure it's the first thing of the day, and then it's going to get done. If you're starting a side hustle or something, it's generally a lot easier to work on it before you go to work compared to after you go to work. Because after you come home from work, you're dealing with low energy levels and other things come up and social stuff happens. But very rarely does social stuff happen early in the mornings. It tends to happen more in the evenings. Anyway, I haven't actually quite figured out what my action point is going to be to get more joy in my life. But to be honest, I feel like I have enough joy in my personal life, and I will get more joy in my work life by having, more kind of in-person team vibes, which always vibes with me. And then finally on the social front, because I realized that I haven't seen friends in a while, I'm going to have a chat to my wife tonight, and we're going to sort of get a standing order social event, like a weekly brunch or a weekly dinner, or, that kind of thing in the calendar. Because generally when action points get converted into calendar events, that is when, at least for me and my wife, that's when they actually happen. And finally, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't yet got a good system for time management in your life, I have a video over here that breaks down the triage method that I learned in my time working as a doctor. That has really, really helped with time management to help actually make these action points become a reality. So thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye-bye.